Welcome to Sustainable in the City, where Nashville sustainability champions take the spotlight. Join Urban Green Lab and Zero Waste Nashville as we dive deep into the stories of everyday Nashvillians. We'll chat with your neighbors, coworkers, and fellow community members about the small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville. From reducing waste to planting trees, our guests will share their stories about the benefits, barriers, and motivators behind everyday choices. Tune in and be inspired by the power of individual action. This is Sustainable in the City.
Welcome to the very first episode of Sustainable in the City, the podcast. My name is Allie Omens. I am the Zero Waste Program Coordinator for Metro Nashville Waste Services, a division of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, which is the longest title for a municipality ever existed. I am on the Zero Waste Nashville team. We educate and provide outreach to residents across Nashville to learn how to reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost their waste.
Awesome. And I'm Karissa Hampton. I am the Sustainable Households Manager for Urban Green Lab, which we are a Nashville-based nonprofit that teaches communities to live sustainably. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, we're here in Nashville Public Library's Studio NPL space, recording our very first podcast. Neither of us have ever done this before.
Right, but they were definitely helpful in teaching us all we need to know, and definitely nearby if we need them.
Yeah, it's a great resource. Go out and visit your local public library any day of the week. Sustainable in the City is a podcast, but it once was a webinar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were going around finding the experts in the city on sustainability. We were doing all kinds of panel discussions, interviews, and really hearing the higher level of Nashville sustainability.
And Sustainable in the City, it's always been a great partnership between Zero Waste Nashville and Urban Green Lab. We work really well together. We work in very similar spaces. Sustainability and waste go hand in hand. And it was a great experience to talk to a lot of leaders in Nashville and learn about their work. But we're really excited to explore this new way of highlighting sustainable action in Nashville.
Yeah, I think that the more that we move away from who we considered initially the experts, we're learning more and more that the experts are the people that are down on the ground doing this work day in and day out. They might not necessarily call themselves sustainability experts, but they're doing it in their everyday actions.
Yeah, experts are, well, me and you in our personal lives, but we would like to think that experts can be anyone. Experts, we should empower each other to all be experts in the little ways that we can all make a difference. I think there's a lot in sustainability and waste reduction that can feel very complicated and feel very out of reach. And the more that we can do the work to empower each other and help us all see that there are little things that we can do every day that make a big difference for Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we were talking about how can we capture these stories of sustainability, because every action, whether it was intentional or you did it out of necessity, everyone has their individual story and their journey as they experience sustainability in different ways. There's so many different entry points that we wanted to highlight that here.
Yeah, and we're excited to talk specifically about the benefits, barriers, and motivators of sustainable choices. So that's how we'll be framing each episode and each conversation with our guest, getting at the benefits, barriers, and motivators to better understand these somewhat daily choices that people make that add up to really meaningful difference for our city.
I think that when we talk about the benefits of sustainability, they seem so obvious for someone who works in sustainability. However, there are so many barriers to why people can't live sustainably right now or yet that I think that's super important to hear all the different sides of sustainability. And that just naturally leads into motivation. Why are people motivated to live sustainably? And why are they, who are they making these choices for?
Exactly. And benefits, barriers and motivators can be framed differently depending on the person. Someone may think immediately about the barrier and not even be able to see the benefit or realize the benefit and motivation to any action. Or the benefits may be really clear to someone that reducing my waste can help me create less trash that I'm rolling out to the curb, but not understand or not be able to move into the space of motivating and actually getting out and buying in bulk or composting your food scraps. Maybe that last piece of motivating the behavior change isn't quite there. I think approaching this in a conversational way that helps people feel supported and not criticized for not doing enough, because often we can feel, I feel like I'm never doing enough, especially working in this space. And there's a lot that we all are doing, and we may just not celebrate it enough or celebrate each other enough. We can start, for this introductory episode, we want to turn things back on ourselves. You may, if you've watched Sustainable in the City in the webinar format, you may know what Karissa and I do for work and may know a little bit about our organizations, but we wanted to model this new format for the episodes and kind of shine the light back on ourselves and think about our own individual stories and our individual journeys, despite what we do for a living and kind of why we do what we do for a living, but more as people rather than representing our organizations. How did you start your sustainability journey?
So I would say that initially sustainability was born out of necessity. In my family, I grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, near a lot of lakes, a lot of rivers and creeks. We had a small chicken farm, and I remember going to my grandmother and saying, "Grandma, I'm hungry." And she was like, "You can either go kill a chicken or you can catch a fish." And it was just this idea that, hey, you make your own, we made our own food, we provided our own food, we picked food out of the garden, and it was just the lifestyle. I got quickly into the habit of collecting eggs before church so that we could sell them. If I were to stay over a friend's house, we had to start with the farm chores every single morning. So I got into the habit of working with the land. Then by the time I was 14, I was working in cornfields. My first job was actually corn detasseling, where they would drop me off in a cornfield at 6 o'clock in the morning. The bus would come pick us up for lunch, and then we'd go right back out into the cornfield. And so just being out in nature at all times, there wasn't really a place to, I guess, waste food. We were constantly storing food. We were constantly, skinning fish to eat that day. It wasn't anything where we could really throw things out. I learned at a very young age that you use what you have. You stretch out what you have. You mend your clothes. We actually didn't even have a heating and air system in our house. So when it gets cold in Michigan, you go out and chop wood. So it was just, sustainability was all around me. I didn't necessarily know that was living sustainably. And then later on, when I moved to Nashville, it was actually this huge culture shock, this huge transition for me. I moved at the age of 12. And when I moved here, I was just blown away by how quick you could get everything. How you could go to the store, you could get your, you could get your meat, you could get your produce, and it was already picked, and everything looked the same. And it was just this huge culture shock to me. And so as I went through life, I was always constantly trying to make my life more like it was on the farm, but it just was not applicable here in Nashville. I didn't have a green space to plant anything. I didn't have fresh meat from the farm next door because there wasn't a farm next door. And so sustainability for me just kept on changing to sustainability in Nashville and what that looked like and what that looked like for me moving forward or as a mother. Eventually, I stumbled upon Urban Green Lab while I was teaching, and they had the sustainable classrooms program where they taught us how to incorporate sustainability into our classroom in a really natural way using their curriculum. And eventually I made the decision to leave the classroom, which I saw that Urban Green Lab was hiring. And here I am working in sustainability, sharing my story and going out and doing all these things.
I'm curious if you have any barriers that you experience now, having experienced what you did growing up, and it sounded like the motivation, you spoke to that, and that was embedded in your family life. Now that you've lived so many years since then, how do you experience how have your motivations changed? How have your barriers changed?
I feel like my motivations changed primarily because I wanted my children to still have access to the fresh food, the fresh lifestyle that I grew up with. I take advantage of the composting services. I take advantage of the recycling services. I take advantage of my, mini garden that I can just now start. I definitely think it takes more intentionality when trying to be more sustainable in a city. So I would say that the barriers have changed, but also the culture. Where I grew up, everyone around me was super sustainable. They didn't call it sustainability, but they were super sustainable. But moving to Nashville, it almost seemed like, hey, there's a lot of focus on buying more. There's a lot of focus on the clothes, the style, the culture, and adjusting to that and almost making, I guess, sustainability cool in the sense that, hey, this is something that is culturally accepted.
I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I think a lot of people can relate to the feeling of, or from the conversations that I've heard, seeing Nashville change over time and some of the farmlands dwindling, and you're losing that connection to the land in a lot of ways that can motivate people or make people more aware of what it means to be connected with the earth and be sustainable in that way.
Yeah, definitely. So what about you, Allie?
Me.
Tell us your story.
I grew up in San Diego, California, which please don't tune off if hearing that, living in Nashville, if that makes you not want to listen to this podcast anymore. I'm sorry. I am here from the great state of California. But no, I grew up in San Diego, and I can't say that sustainability was really embedded in my family culture per se. I think it was something that I didn't realize was as big of an element in my community as it was until I moved to North Carolina. So I moved to North Carolina to attend university, and I think people expected me to be that caricature of a Californian. I went to a majority, a school that had a lot of students from North Carolina, and I would say I'm from California, and they would make comments about, me being a hippie or things like that. And I think part of me at some point just kind of leaned in, thought, well, okay, if that's what you expect, then maybe I will be that. So I remember I had a little compost pail that I would keep outside of my dorm room in college, and I wish I could go back in time and remember what exactly motivated me to do that, other than just feeling the culture shock of moving from Southern California to Central North Carolina and wanting to bring sustainability with me. Now, North Carolina has a lot of really incredible sustainable initiatives, so not to say that there's not that motivation and that drive to be sustainable in that state, but maybe it was just the context I was in at school. I thought, I'm going to bring this here. I'm going to bring this little part of my life back home and bring it here. So I would keep my little compost pail. It was totally gross. I didn't know what I was doing at that point other than just keeping this teeny tiny little pail that I would put apple cores and banana peels in and not take it out nearly enough. And it smelled, and my roommates complained. But food waste and food in general was my touch point for going into sustainability, and food as a wasted resource in particular. I think food is a really interesting place for people to connect. Generally, thinking about sitting down and eating meals and the kinds of food that we eat. There's so many social components to that. And I'm a very social person, so I like to think about eating in community and Often when we eat in community, we tend to waste if we're not careful. So I became interested in food redistribution and food rescue as a mode of reducing waste. And there are a lot of important players both in North Carolina and in Tennessee and really across the country that are working to rescue food and feed people. And I think it's just really important to recognize those efforts. And so I became interested in waste kind of through food. I really like that waste it feels more tangible. It feels like something I can touch and feel and see. I'm interested in all sorts of ways of being sustainable. But if I think about how it feels to turn off the lights versus how it feels to put something in my compost pile, it feels different to me. And I really like that. At some point on my journey, I became interested in the role of municipalities and local governments in reducing waste and promoting sustainable behavior in their communities. I think back to my time living in San Diego. I think there was a way that it wasn't that my individual family decided to take actions. It was that my local community set that standard for me. And I always thought that was very powerful. So I studied public policy in school because I found it really interesting to think about the role of municipalities and governments in promoting sustainable behavior and promoting waste reduction. And I found myself moving to Nashville after college, after being in North Carolina, and I was so grateful to move to Nashville and not really know exactly what I wanted to do other than I wanted to work for the local government. And there was this department called Metro Nashville Public Works. And I thought, I have no idea what public works means. But they seem like they do this kind of stuff. And they were looking for help. They were looking for support in focusing specifically on construction waste, which I mentioned that my intro to waste was food. Did not include buildings on my list of how I entered this space. But I'm a naturally curious person, and I was curious at the opportunity to learn more about another form of waste. And when we think about wasting buildings, it's a huge amount of Nashville's waste stream. It's just a huge waste of resources in general. So I started my work with, at that time, Metro Nashville Public Works. And then we became Metro Nashville Waste Services when we moved departments to the water department. And I've been really fascinated at how I've been able to grow so much in doing that work, but just learning more about human behavior, and everything comes back to people and how people relate to these things. So I think that kind of brings us around to benefits, barriers, and motivators all over the place in my journey. But I think even as a person working in sustainability and working in waste, I can feel the barrier when I talk to residents and I hear the stories about people not wanting to drive their compost to go drop it off at a convenience center. I think, yeah, I'm lucky to work at a place that has my little drop-off compost at the office. People have a lot going on, and the barriers can kind of pile up. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think the motivation is having interacted with residents and hearing incredible stories about people finding creative ways to do the little things every day that make them reduce their waste. And they're doing it voluntarily. There's nothing that the city of Nashville is requiring anyone to say that they're reducing their waste, that they're recycling, that they're composting. But people are doing that because it matters to them, because for one reason or another, they know it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. That keeps me going, and it keeps me inspired to keep doing this work.
Yeah. I love hearing, the different stories. When we talk about education at Urban Green Lab, we constantly talk about how living sustainably can feel like this checklist of things that you're supposed to do, that you're supposed to mark off, that you recycle and that you compost, check. I started my own herb garden, check. I buy locally, check. But you have to find sustainability where it fits into your life. You have to find that avenue where you find value in living sustainability, sustainably, where you truly see the benefits outweighing the barriers.
Absolutely. Yeah. My motivators can sometimes change as I learn more and as I interact with more people, and I love hearing people's stories, and I love when people are willing to be vulnerable with us in the work that we do. My colleague and I gave a presentation about composting a few weeks ago at a library, and we had someone bring a little container of their own worm composting to this presentation. I just thought, that's so cool. This person really wants to inspire people. This person really cares. They care so much that they're going to get a scoop of compost and bring it to this presentation on a random Saturday afternoon. They clearly know what they're doing with composting, but they were there to be a beacon of hope, I think, to the other people in that room that may have not known what they were doing and how to even start composting.
That's awesome. True story. I actually was in a science fair, and mine was a worm bed.
No way.
And I won second place, which I was really upset about. The person who won first place was showing that plants listen to music and they grow according to the music they're exposed to. And so after that, I started experimenting with his experiment as well as my own. But yeah, worm beds are close to my heart.
That's not a bad thing to get second place.
Right. I know. I was like, that's pretty impressive.
But I appreciate the ways that we've been able to work together and learn from each other's, both our organizations and just each other as people, because we believe that there are ways that Nashville can be more sustainable and be an inspiration for other communities across the Southeast. And we believe in the people that live in Nashville and that we have what it takes to make a change and bring the grassroots energy kind of from the bottom up to help mobilize, making a difference and helping improve our environment for the benefit of Nashville. As we close out on this first episode of Sustainable in the City, do you have a go-to sustainability tip that you provide to people? What is your go-to tip?
I think the tip that has always resonated with me was just shopping locally. I think that, shopping near you saves that time and that energy and that labor and transportation and fuel. So shopping from people right here in our own community can definitely save all those resources.
I love that.
What about you? What's a tip?
My tip is to get out and talk to one person this week or in the next few weeks about waste or about being sustainable. Have a conversation with someone close to you about how each of you are making a difference, or get that conversation started. I like to think of myself as a very naturally curious person. I think I said this earlier, but I think there's a lot of power in just asking the question and gathering resources around you and making it more of a conversation to help support people around you in doing the little things every day. So I plan this week to ask my mom how her composting service is going in San Diego. They recently started doing getting curbside composting service as part of state legislation that supported that. And so I'm going to ask her how that's going and see if she's experiencing any barriers, benefits, or motivators to successfully doing that service.
Awesome. So moving forward, we're excited to be inviting guests to our show that are sharing their sustainability journeys.
Yeah, we've been brainstorming a few ideas. We'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. We don't want to give all of our secrets away, but we really want this to be a conversation with, like we've been saying, everyday people. So instead of maybe the head of some of the organizations that we've had on before, interviewing their volunteers, everyday people that somehow also get involved with these organizations. So one example that comes to mind, we hope to bring on a participant in Nashville's Food Scraps Pickup Pilot program that my organization is running. Karissa, you were mentioning having someone from your volunteer program.
Yeah, we have been piloting the UGL volunteers And so many of those volunteers have such unique stories and reasons why they entered into this world of sustainable action. And so, yeah, we're really excited to hear what they have to say.
We're excited to get into people's minds a little bit and better understand how they found this space and hopefully help them inspire other people that tune in and listen. So join us as we take this journey together, taking this webinar format, making it into a podcast, and hoping to inspire a few Nashvillians along the way.
Thanks for tuning in to Sustainable in the City. Sustainable in the City is produced by Urban Green Lab and Zero Waste Nashville, a division of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, with recording assistance provided by the Nashville Public Library's Studio NPL team. Our theme song is produced by Draped Apes. Subscribe in all the places you listen to podcasts. To learn how to reduce your waste, find Zero Waste Nashville online at zerowaste.nashville.gov. For more tips on how to live sustainably, follow Urban Green Lab on social media at Urban Green Lab or online at urbangreenlab.org. Join us next time for more stories about small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville.